Spider-Man No Way Home was an absolute holiday miracle, so yes, I am reviewing it in front of my Christmas tree. You've probably seen a lot of reviews already, so I'm just gonna give you my take on how the movie affected me, the future of the MCU, and the superhero genre in general. Yes, I saw the movie 3 times, sue me. I've been giving a lot of thought into how I wanted to structure this review for a little bit, and I realized that I'm not good at organization, so I'm diving head first, spoilers ahead. First, let's get the technical stuff out of the way. Up until this point, this is the best looking Spider-Man live-action movie to date. We all know the Andrew Garfield films had their own charm, and the Sam Raimi trilogy is classic, but this one just takes it up to another level. Honestly, the visual effects for the previous 2 Spider-Man projects still hold well up until those time points, but now we have some bigger standards, especially for the MCU. With that said, I can guarantee you this one is 1000% the best looking Spider-Man film out there. We still have Into the Spider-Verse, but that's a whole different conversation altogether.
I love this burger.
The lighting, the colors, the sets, the costumes, everything in this film visually was meant to be a celebration of the cinematic history of Spider-Man on the big screen. And it has a lot of cool nods to the comic books as well. This was really important, at least to me, because the cinematography tends to be something that's usually shunned in movies if it doesn't affect the plot. Hold your fire! This is really important, at least in this case, because the cinematography helps progress the movie forward. Usually, we complain when a movie of this size uses fancy visuals to try to make up for a lack of good storytelling. But in this case, it is actually the opposite. The visual elements keep you interested, but the plot carries the entire film. And ladies and gentlemen, this is where the movie truly shines, in the story. Listen, we've been covering rumors, reports, and leaks for this movie for over a year and a half, and I am flabbergasted at the fact that they managed to surpass every single expectation that we had. From the trailer, we know that Spider-Man had to make a decision after Far From Home because Mysterio revealed his identity.
Peter Parker.
And apparently he decided that the best way to do so was to brainwash the entire universe with the help of Doctor Strange. We theorized for months on whether this was actually Doctor Strange, whether it was Mephisto, but it honestly just works. Why? Because at this moment, Tom Holland's Peter Parker is still struggling with the responsibility and the pressure of being known as Iron Boy Jr. Being the successor to Iron Man is no easy feat. Using a spell of this magnitude that would add so many consequences to his actions is a really good way to push the story forward. By putting him in a position where he has to make tough decisions and face the consequences of his actions, this cinematic event proved that Tom Holland was the perfect casting to play Peter Parker and Spider-Man. The story itself is based upon one of the more controversial story runs, which is called One More Day. In this story, just like in the film, Peter Parker has to enlist the help of Doctor Strange in order to have a spell to have everybody forget that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Later, we learn that Peter Parker has to make a deal with Mephisto, the literal Marvel devil, in order to forego his marriage to Mary Jane and complete his mission. I'm not gonna cover the entire 2 hours, you can watch the film, but there are 3 key things that we need to mention when it comes to the emotional center of this project and how it affects the story. Number 1 is Tom Holland's Peter Parker willing to risk absolutely everything, the entire universe if need be, in order to make the right decision and become Spider-Man. As Doctor Strange explains, the only reason that the villains from the other universes are coming here to the main MCU timeline is because of his mistake.
We started getting some visitors.
With that being said, Peter knows that the only way to truly fix his mistake is to send the villains back to their own universes. However, we learn from Doctor Strange that this is essentially condemning the villains because it is their fate to die by Spider-Man's hand.
Hello, Peter.
So Peter Parker makes the decision to try to fix the villains before he sends them back home so they don't perish. He openly defied the Sorcerer Supreme, who could have solved his problems with the push of a button, because he felt compelled and attached to that feeling of responsibility that he had to do the right thing. That by itself sold me on Tom Holland's Peter Parker. But that leads me to the second major plot point that makes this movie so good, and it is the death of Aunt May. That death in the family is what truly forces Peter to become Spider-Man. I am personally a really big fan of changing things up if it makes sense for the story. And the fact that they used Aunt May, which had been building up a relationship with Peter for the past 3 or 4 movies, as the emotional linchpin for his transition into Spider-Man was a superb choice. Watching him suffer as one of Spider-Man's most iconic villains, in this case Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, kills Aunt May as a psychological Jenga ploy to try to warp his moral compass still gives me goosebumps. For all of the people that were concerned that this was going to be more of the same, Tom Holland's Peter Parker being Iron Boy Jr., this absolutely changed it. This emotional moment sealed his transition. Why? Because he had to make a choice. And that choice, of course, is embracing the fact that with great power comes great responsibility. At this point in the film, Peter's life is in shambles, his Aunt May died, the villains are running amok, and that leads me to the third major plot point that says sets everything together, and that is the multiversal crossover. Listen, we already knew that having the villains from the Andrew Garfield and Sam Raimi movies was going to fuel the hype for this movie all the way up to the stratosphere, because obviously we wanted to see all three Spider-Men come back for this one. But I honestly think we should take a moment to tip our hat off at Marvel, because they didn't do it as a gimmick or a simple cameo. This was essentially the most important plot point for Peter to not go over to the deep end. Going to the local movie theater with a sold-out crowd at an IMAX theater and having so many people from so many different generations come in for a cinematic event just as this one is just sensational. I haven't felt a crowd be this hype since Endgame. We already knew in our hearts that it was possible that all three would show up, but the way that Marvel Studios executed this was absolutely perfect. Tobey and Andrew's Spider-Man came in clutch to try to find the cure for all the different villains and send them back into their universes without sending them to the Shadow Realm. But their greatest contribution is showing Tom Holland's Peter Parker that being Spider-Man means that you make the tough choice always. That includes sacrificing one's personal desires and well-being in order to help others. The curious thing is that even after this, Tom Holland's Peter Parker still gives up. He verbally tells them, "I'm done, this is your problem." It still gets me emotional because in that moment at that rooftop, we get the exact meaning of what Spider-Man is supposed to represent. All three versions of Spider-Man embrace their loss, their pain, and they realize that the only way to truly become a hero is to embrace the words from Ben Parker and Aunt May.
With great power comes great responsibility.
The third act of this movie was absolutely sensational because it served as a culmination of 20 years of Spider-Man storytelling. And it also set up the future of the MCU when it comes to multiversal crossovers. One of the greatest things that we haven't mentioned so far is how great the villains were.
Bingo.
Yes, some of it did it more than others because the actors for Flint Marko and Kurt Connors were not able to be on set, so they didn't get that much time. But when it comes to Jamie Foxx, Willem Dafoe, and Alfred Molina, they carried. All three of these men earned their paycheck in strides, especially Willem Dafoe. Jamie Foxx as Electro and Alfred Molina as Doctor Octopus spiced things up and gave more context into the legacy that they created in the previous films. But Willem Dafoe proved two major things with his performance. A, he's one of the best actors of his generation.
Me.
And B, he's one of the best supervillains of all time. Easily top 3 in the MCU's history, for example. His facial, auditory, and behavioral cues for whenever he's switching between Norman Osborn and the Green Goblin
You killed them. We killed them.
We.
shook the entire theater to its core. I mean, this man had everybody hyped, screaming and cheering every time that this man flexed his acting chops. And the best part is that this amazing performance also reflects on the story itself. And why is that? Well, the Green Goblin is the main psychological and physical obstacle that Tom Holland's Peter Parker has to overcome in order to truly become Spider-Man. We did have a couple of surprises and amazing interactions which I will leave for you to experience at the theater, but all you have to know is that this movie delivers in every way imaginable. And the recent success of this movie at the box office is living proof that great storytelling through superhero movies should be celebrated. This film broke opening weekend records, it almost became the biggest opening weekend release ever, and it's the first movie in the pandemic to surpass the box office mark of $1 billion. Not only that, it also became one of the best reviewed and critically acclaimed superhero movies of all time, to the point that now Sony and Marvel are making an active campaign to get this movie nominated at the Oscars. We already know that it's not going to be the first superhero movie that's nominated for the Oscars because Black Panther already took that prize, but listen, this is amazing. With so many people thinking that this movie was going to under-deliver, the fact that it's about to be nominated for an Oscar is just groundbreaking. The enormous amount of buzz, money, and critical acclaim that this movie is creating is the perfect storm to have studios like Marvel and Sony and other ones collaborate together to bring more franchise crossovers in the future. As a matter of fact, we recently had news that the Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness reshoots that had been completed in the past couple of weeks had more cameos and characters be introduced because of the success of Spider-Man No Way Home. Honestly, at this point, from my perspective, the sky is the limit. My biggest bets in terms of multiversal crossovers that might come next are the X-Men and the Fantastic Four, especially if we want to teeter in bringing in new multiversal villains like Galactus and Kang the Conqueror into the mix. There is so much to cover, we could literally be talking about this forever. All I wanted to say is that with movies like this and their overlap with the animated shows and live-action shows like What If, WandaVision, and Loki, the future is looking bright for MCU fans. Okay, that was a lot of information, let's reel it back in for a sec. Is Spider-Man No Way Home a perfect movie? No, but it is damn near close. Listen, personally, I would say that this is 1000% the best live-action adaptation of Spider-Man, but I still think I'm teetering between this and Into the Spider-Verse as the best Spider-Man movie ever. Overall, the storytelling, the visual elements, the nostalgia, and the setup for the future movies of the MCU is a cosmic whirlwind of movie-making success, which lands this Spider-Man movie as one of the top 3 Marvel MCU movies in my opinion. If I had to give it an objective rating without any bias, I would honestly land it at a 9.5 or even a 9.7 out of 10. And it is a definite must-watch for any fan of the character. There you go. I'm gonna cover all the Easter eggs and nuances for this film in separate videos, but you know I had to get this one out because you know how much this character means to me. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for your support over the past year. You guys have absolutely changed my life. I'll be doing my best to give you more of the amazing content that you deserve. So before we leave, make sure to like, comment, share, and hit that notification bell icon so you can get instant notifications for whenever I go live or whenever I post a video. Also, as always, you should know that I go live every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday on my YouTube. The timing usually changes because I'm busy, okay? So make sure you check out my Instagram, my Twitter, and all my other social media handles so you can get instant notifications and updates for whenever I go live. If you made it this far, honestly, thank you. As always, make sure to stay safe and drop a smile. I'll see you later, familia.